Hello. Sorry took my part about asking who was from Canada, so sorry, but hi. I think I'm the solitary Canadian speaking this year, so there we go. All right. So where this came from is actually Annie's presentation is a great companion to mine because Annie talks about all these great ways to pull out your data and make it look fantastic. I'm going to talk about how do you figure out what data you're supposed to be giving to the clients in the first place. So last year, they did this Moz blog survey to ask what they should be talking about on the Moz blog, and I outlined a bunch of the things that I saw that indicated that this was obviously a topic that we needed to discuss in the community. Number 3, clients, customers misunderstand my work. That's a big one. Clients don't get it. I'm going to talk about that in a second. Politics and buy-in. I got fired, Measurement analysis, how am I supposed to report? And clients, customers are difficult. Why can't they just agree to what I want them to do? Why do they have to ask me so many questions? And of course, Annie, being awesome, she tweeted this. I think it was earlier this year. Reporting on last-click attribution in 2014 is like buying a football team and only paying the players who score. And I think that's a really important thing to remember, is that there's so many different pieces that go into the total marketing mix for a client. And if you only report on the players who score, you're doing yourself and the client a disservice. Maybe it makes you look good, but it makes the social team look bad, for example, and that's not fair to anybody. And then Ian Lurie posted a post about the one-trick ponies get shot. Does anyone, who read that post? Okay, after MozCon, go to this URL, read Ian's post. It is an excellent companion to what I'm talking about today because it's talking about the evolution of digital marketing with strategy, with reporting, and what that means when we talk to our clients. So now I have a couple stories to tell you. First one, last year, I showed some ads for a tattoo removal service, and they were really funny, and people laughed, and I got a few comments about it. That client totally fired us 2 months later. And it wasn't because the ads weren't funny. They had a fantastic click-through rate. They got lots of leads, but we weren't able to prove our value to that client. They didn't see the value in what we did because our report wasn't making it clear to them. So they fired us. And at the time, we're like, oh, screw them. But now it makes sense, now that we've gone back and thought about it. Story number 2 is another client of ours, a very large home builder, all over North America. We deal with home sales for 2 cities in Alberta, Edmonton and Calgary. And their VP of marketing, who is not our client, we deal with the marketing manager for this small division of this much larger company, decided that they should have one agency of record for all of Alberta. And it's a $5 million engagement. They put it out to RFP. We're 5 people. There's no way we could have bid on this business, plus we don't do any offline. They needed TV, they needed radio, they needed print, they needed digital, they needed everything. So a big agency got the contract, and our client said, I love you guys, but I have to go with this. She said, but I saved a little bit of money, so could I pay you to report on what this other company is doing? And that's all I want, and maybe a little bit of SEO advice. But mostly just tell us what's going on. What's important to them is making sure that everybody's rowing in the same direction. So that's what we report on. And so it's been going on for 6 months. And because of these reports, we now have an opportunity, because the agency is actually really doing a terrible job with digital, we now have an opportunity to bid on the digital pieces again to get them back in our agency. And it's strictly through the strength of our reporting, which is really exciting. And so those sorts of things came together and said, this is a topic that I should be talking about at MozCon to tell all of you how to report so well that you'll never get fired. In theory, not guaranteed. All right, so how many people here have said the client doesn't get it? Come on, I know more of you have, you're lying. I can see some hands at the back. Okay, the client doesn't get it is never an excuse. I mean, okay, sometimes clients are kind of dumb, shall we say? Maybe, just a little bit. But the client doesn't get it means that we're doing a crappy job of explaining what it is that we do to the client. The client doesn't get it as shorthand for, I cannot be bothered to explain, why can't they just agree? This is too much work, I'm really frustrated, the client doesn't get it. Part of that too also comes from ego. We're doing the work, we think we're doing an amazing job. Why doesn't the client recognize that? The client doesn't get it. We have to put our egos aside and think about it from the client's perspective, because the clients don't always care about what you care about. The clients care about their business. They care about selling houses. That's great that you got all those Facebook shares, that piece of viral content that you made, but it didn't actually sell more houses. I didn't get more test drives because you optimized the landing page. Like, that's this kind of stuff the client's going to care about. And so that client doesn't get it as really a fundamental disconnect between the things that you care about and what the client cares about. And then there's also the discussion about how do you define great work? Is it awards? Is it industry accolades? Is it speaking at conferences? What to you says, this is amazing work? Or is it hitting the client's goals? And there's been a lot of talk here about traditional advertising agencies and how they're coming to get us. And I'm actually on the board of the Advertising Club of Edmonton, so I do deal a fair amount with advertising agencies. And one of the things that's interesting is that they hire creative directors based on how many awards they've won, not good work for the client. They don't measure success in the same way that we can. This is our competitive advantage. And one of the things that separates a great client from an evil client, white and the black hat, is goals. That's the number one thing that differentiates those types of clients. Being able to say to a client and say, what do you care about? What is your primary unit of value? And of course, clients always have multiple things that they want to put out. They say, oh, well, I want to sell a bunch of cars, but I also really want to make sure that people are feeling good about me in the community and all these other primary metrics. But the thing is that if you can define that one primary metric of value and report everything based on that, it can really help you look good to the client, and also can help you do great work for the client, work that matters. And setting real goals is totally scary, and I get that, because once you set the goal, then, oh God, you have to meet it. And there's nothing worse than not meeting goals. We've heard a lot about failure, right, and not the Olympics, for example. And so failure is the worst. Like, I've had spectacular failures, as I'm sure many of you have, and it feels like crap, and then you get up, and after a while it gets better, and you feel like maybe you can leave the house again. But when you're setting goals at work, sometimes this is people's jobs on the line, right? So if your client is the marketing manager, and they say, well, here's our goal, but I really don't want to commit to something specific because I'm terrified that if I don't hit it, I'm going to lose my job. There's a lot of pressure on you, it's a lot of pressure on the client. But setting those goals is the only thing that's actually going to mean that your work has value. I also want to talk about the idea of goals versus aspirations. So goals, we're pretty familiar with, right? SMART goals, talk about that in a second. Aspirations are those kind of fuzzy things, like make people feel better about us, brand awareness, right? It's not measurable, but it's important, but it's not a goal. And often, sometimes you have to go back to the SMART goals, right? Specific, measurable. I always forget the A. What's the A, guys? Actionable, thank you. Realistic, time-based, right? Every goal should be a SMART goal, and if it isn't, then it's an aspiration. So next I have some real goals from real clients with their permission. It was funny writing those emails. They're like, hey, I'm doing a talk on goals, and I want to show yours because they're not very good. Is that okay? And they're like, yeah, do you mind not showing our brand name? I'm like, yeah, no problem, that's cool. So these are real, actual goals from our clients that we've received in the past, I think, 3 months. All right, so first one, increase total sales of 17.5 million. This is actually by the end of 2014. Great, SMART goal, we can do this, no problem. And it breaks down further, like in what industry specifically they want to attract. It's a B2B business. Increase customer satisfaction rating. Feels a little fuzzy, right? Like, this is not necessarily the best goal in the world. It doesn't say by how much. It doesn't say how they measure their customer satisfaction rating now. It doesn't say what's going to happen when we get there. Are we going to keep going? Like, how are we going to make this happen? It's okay. And so here's an even worse one. Brand organization, and you can insert like any organization in this. This is so generic, as the brand statement, and communicate the economic and social value of organization to stakeholders. Okay. All right, so you're just gonna like slap that tagline under the logo. So it was actually like the brand statement was quite lengthy. And how are you gonna communicate the economic social value? What is exactly the economic and social value of your organization? Who are the stakeholders? How are we gonna communicate to this? And a million questions. This is a real goal for a real company that does a lot of business. And then my favorite, and probably the worst one, evaluate the effectiveness of current communication tools in order to ensure profitability and growth. Like, oh, you guys, that goal is really crappy. And we actually went to the client after they sent us this, and we said, this goal is not good. And they said, yeah, we know, we're sorry. And I said, well, then why? And they said, well, we had to write something, and we were in this thing all day, and they hired a consultant, and we were doing goals, and we wrote down this goal, and the consultant was like, that's great. I'm like, fire that guy. Like, what are you doing? And so it was really interesting to kind of walk the client through that process, and they totally knew that goal was bad. They were aware of its badness. And we're working with them to make it better, but a lot of times, because again, setting goals is scary, they set goals that are kind of crappy. So keep that in mind. Give the client some slack. Sometimes there's outside forces at work when you're talking about goal setting. And so once you finally get that goal set, like selling slices of cake, then you can start to build your strategy, and you can think about your report as well. And when you start to build the strategy, I'm going to show an example later on, you can think about how everything is going to relate to that goal. All of your social, your email leads, your email marketing campaigns, your blog posts, any other messaging that you have, your offline messaging, everything has to relate back to that goal. And if it doesn't, you can toss it. You can say, this is not important right now. Maybe we'll write it down for later if that ever becomes a goal. But it also means that you get really laser focused on that goal. And you're not letting extraneous things like all the cool stuff you learned at MozCon distract you from hitting your client's goals. So here's another example. We have a client who is a adult toy store, shall we say. And I kind of want to show the PPC ads for that one, maybe later. They're really fun. So she's probably our most fun client and the most surreal meetings because we meet at her store. So yeah, my account manager texted her mom. She's like, guess who our clients are? Her mom thinks that we don't actually have real jobs. So anyway, this client, one of her goals is she wants to improve in-store traffic. Her e-commerce traffic is doing great, but she wants more people to come into the store and buy stuff, because otherwise, why is she spending all this money on rent? So one of the things that we talked about was, well, we should do a technical audit for mobile. And then to sell it to the client, so that to get her on board doing this, is say, well, the reason why we need to do a technical audit for mobile is that if people are searching at work for adult toys, they're probably not searching on their work computers, which are totally monitored by the IT department. They're going to search on their phones. Or they're going to be out and about and say, what's the address of that place? And they're going to search on their phones. So the technical audit is really important because it's going to help us create a better mobile experience. It's going to help us figure out what we need to do to make mobile better for the customers that you do have, and also to make it better for mobile SEO. You tell that to the client, they're like, oh, great. Yeah, let's do it. But if you say, oh, we have to do a technical audit because it's important, the client's like, I don't know why. But if you relate to that goal, they're much more likely to approve the kinds of things that you want to get done to get them to that point. The other important thing to consider is the realisticness of goals. This is where keyword research comes in really handy. If the client says, I'm going to sell 1 billion slices of cake, and in your keyword research you find out that only 2 people Googled cake in the past year, you're going to have a really difficult conversation with a client. And we have had these conversations before where we say, like, look, I know that you think that this is the number of leads you're going to get by showing up well for this particular set of phrases, but there's just not enough people in the city that you serve Googling this. We're going to have to branch out, or you have to revise your expectations. And you have the data, so this is how you have the conversation, so that you don't later on have a really disappointing report and the client says, well, you suck, you're fired, even though it's not really your fault. It's just that's the number of people searching for the thing. And then you can consider things like, can we increase the demand for this particular product and more advertising stuff. But in the meantime, this is the data you have and this is what you're going to do with it. One of our superpowers as digital marketers is that we can measure almost everything. Let's talk about a lot of measurable stuff, especially the stuff that Annie talked about, how to get all those measurements out of it. We can show everything in our reports. We can, so for example, TV or radio. The people who report on TV or radio give reports that say, yes, we spent all your money. Yay, please keep paying us. Like they don't, maybe they'll say how many people were probably watching the TV show or listening to the radio at the particular time the ad was shown, but they have no sense necessarily of how many people were engaged with it, how many people actually listened to it. You know, one thing that I say a lot is just because the ad was shown doesn't mean anybody looked at it. And that's a really important thing to be able to report on. So as marketers, we can take this and say, well, we know that the radio ad played 10 times between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. on this particular channel in this market. Was there an increase in, say, direct traffic? Did we set up a tracking URL? Were there visits to it? Did we set up a tracking number? Were there phone calls to that phone number? And I actually have a whiteboard Friday that talks about this as well. I recommend looking that up. I'll tweet out the link to it later. But those are things that you can report on, which also makes you valuable because it's bringing it back to those goals. And then if the client is spending thousands and thousands of dollars on radio and TV and it isn't working, it's not you saying the traditional advertisers are bad, it's just the data. And that's, you're just showing them what's going on. And then, if they cut the TV budget, then maybe that's more money for you, which is nice for everybody. The other thing to remember is don't say the word conversions to clients. Let's banish that from our outside the office lexicon. Conversions is a really nice thing to say internally, but when you say it to a client, they immediately think sales. And sometimes a conversion is not a sale. Sometimes a conversion is a simple act of a client going on a website and educating themselves about something. So this is really nice if you work with government clients, for example, or if you're in-house in government and you're running, say, an anti-smoking campaign and you want to reach out to 10% of the people in Washington state. Load up a geography report, take a look at where the visits come from. You can, and if they download a free, anti-smoking kit or something, that's a conversion. But you don't want to say the word conversions. You want to say something else like engagement or aware citizen or, and find out what kind of language that client uses to make this happen. What kind of language they circulate in their reports, and then that's what you need to use in your report. But don't use the word conversions. And the other thing to think about is that in our industry, it's been so much data, right? Like over the past 3 days, we've been looking at all these different ways to get new kinds of data and cool data and interesting data. And I'm really excited about all the new data I'm going to have to look at when I get back to the office. But we don't have a data problem. We have a filter problem. We are the fire hose that takes in all this data, and our job is to distill it down to this little tiny drinkable coffee cup for the client. And we don't necessarily do a really good job of that. Like, look at all these cool things. And clients are like, I just want more people in my store. I don't care about bounce rate, right? So you have to dial that down as much as you possibly can and boil it down to that essence. And again, relate that to the goals. And have that two-way conversation with your client as well. So I have more people walking into your store. Are you selling more things? So this in-store client is just one location. She's never counted the number of people who walked in her door before and related that to the number of times that she sold something. So just doing something simple like installing a people counter can give you the kind of data where you can talk about things like your in-store sales rate. And that can also make it valuable. So you can find out from the client, hey, how was your month? Did you have the best June ever? Which you did. But did you, what are the people who are walking in the store? Did you find that more of them were buying something, or less of them buying something? What was your average sales size? How was that going up? Have that conversation back and forth with your client, again, related to goals. And if you're working with really, really, really big companies, like we were with the example that I talked about in the beginning, the home builder client, every contractor at that company, and there's a ton of them, there's probably some you don't even know about, are all cogs in the big company machine. And your job is to be the most important cog. Be the barbecue at the barbecue. Become indispensable through really goal-focused reporting. And that means that when the budget cuts come in, or the new marketing manager gets hired, because you're so valuable, they're going to keep you and fire everybody else. Again, not guaranteed, highly likely though. But you don't become that valuable by hoarding the data, saying, no one else can look at these reports, they're special. I love fighting with the web designers to get Google Analytics access. That's the best part of my job. And they say things like, oh, sorry, we can't give you access. I'm like, you know what, you can. I know you can. And here's where you go. I made a screenshot. And then they argue with me, like, oh, I don't know. I don't know if I can do it. Like, I know you use MailChimp for your email program. Like, I know this is the login. Can I have it, please? And so don't hoard that data. Be open and free with your data. Again, like the TV people are never going to report on what you do, but you can report on what the TV people do, and you can give it to them, and they will find it valuable. It will make their jobs better. It will make their lives easier. They will thank you for it. They are less likely to crap all over you when they're asking for more budget. So, and the other thing is be honest, even if things are going really bad, especially if things are going really, really bad. Nothing is more awkward than having that conversation with a client saying, so your organic traffic went down 80% last month, and your leads went down like 200%. And, and you get to tell the client that, and they're like, wow, that's really fantastically terrible. But because you've built up this trust over time, because you've built up these results, because they trust you, because you're reporting on results, they won't fire you right away. Maybe if that like kept going over several months, they might fire you. But for this home builder client, we had the succession. Their old website was terrible. And so we had the succession of reports where organic was just dropping every single month. And every month we were like, waiting for the new website. Let's just hang on. And literally for a year, every report said that. And then finally the new website launched, and the organic went up something like 173% in the first month. And in the office, we're like, oh, yeah, thank goodness that paid off. But it was just getting the client to trust us and just hang in there. We'll get there, I promise. And another thing with being honest is, especially if you're working with large companies or government organizations, people are really afraid to tell these people the truth. So we were working with an advertising agency in a project, and we delivered the final report for this project. It was a PPC campaign, and we couldn't get Google Analytics access at all for the entire campaign. So we couldn't report on whether or not people were actually doing the thing that we want them to do. We knew how many people clicked on the ads. It just dropped off. All we had was AdWords access, no analytics access. And so in the report we wrote, we don't recommend that you do this sort of campaign again until you can give us analytics access. And the advertising agency wrote us and said, oh, this is a bad idea. You shouldn't criticize in the final report. You don't want to piss them off. They're a big company. And we kept it in, and we sent it to them anyway. And then I was talking to someone from this company just casually a couple months later, and she said, I really hate it when these agencies are so afraid we're going to fire them, so they blow smoke up our ass. And I thought, well, good. We remind ourselves, it's not our job to make a client feel good about their bad decisions. You have to be honest. Because if you're like, oh yeah, that sounds great, and then it ends up being terrible, now it's your fault, even though it was the client's stupid idea in the first place. So remember that. Always be honest with your clients. So now that we've talked about all that stuff, reporting again, how can you easily show progress? What we found really helpful is by repeating the goals every single month. Hammer away at those goals. Always be showing it. And I mean, it can seem really repetitive to you, but to the client, it's really clear to show that progress over the next 6 months, year, 2 years, 10 years. The example I have later, the client's been with me for 13 years. And so showing progress over that length of time is really interesting to show how their business has changed and how our business has changed, and how we did SEO 13 years ago is certainly a lot different than how we do it now, but the goals are still there. The other important thing is, can anyone read and understand your report? So another client story, had a client who our contact got fired quite unexpectedly. And we thought, well, that's it. The client contact got fired. We hadn't actually built up any other contacts at this company yet because we've only been working with them for a couple of months. And they hired someone new who came in, and I thought, well, every marketing manager has their pet digital agency that they bring along with them to new companies. And we thought, well, that's it, we're done. And we did our first meeting with this new client contact, and she said, I went over the reports for the last 6 months. Everything looks great. Totally happy with how things are going. Let's get started on continuing on. Like, oh, what a pleasant and wonderful surprise. Totally didn't get fired. And I think that that's also important, to take yourself out of the picture. Could you hand that report to anyone and they would be able to read it and understand what's going on? And do those metrics refer back to your goals? Don't just have metrics for the sake of having shiny metrics. Don't just have metrics that make you look good. Have real metrics that report back to the goals. So this is a chart that we do for every single one of our clients. It's cobbled together from a blog post Avinash did a couple years ago, but also a whole bunch of other things that we've realized work really well for clients. Talk about a goal. So this is one of the goals from the beginning, the increased gross sales to 17.5 million. KPIs, things that we need to make sure that we get to report on, things we need from the client. Gross sales, average sale size, average time to close the sale. Tactics, and this continues on. This is not just all the chart, but use lead tracking to determine a percentage of lead sources per industry and their source. Use lead scoring to identify high close rate, fast closing deals in their source. This is all stuff we want to be able to report on. Metrics. This is where Annie comes in. We need to find out the lead form fields using the multi-attribution model. Where are those leads coming from? What are the different touch points that they make before they convert on the website? And then in the report, the things that we need to report on that we have access to, leads to channels, high value leads to channels. We give this to the client at the very beginning of the engagement. And we go over this. So we're actually starting with the report. Make sure that you go to the client very early on and identify this is the stuff we're going to need so the client can start working on getting you access if it's complicated. Big companies, this always takes forever to get access to anything. And then in the report, make sure that the client knows this is what you're going to get from us. So there's that opportunity to adjust and reflect and make changes if they feel like maybe it's not going to be easy, or actually now that I've thought about it, maybe I want to report on this instead, or that goal is crazy, let's change that. All that kind of stuff can go into at this point, so there's no surprises later. The goal here is you never want to report in a vacuum. You never want to report on data in isolation. You're always relating it back to that goal. And you're also removing, again, that ego, that, look at this awesome crap I did. You're removing that from the equation entirely. You're just saying, this is the metric, it relates back to the goal. It removes a lot of the, trying to make yourself the puffery, making yourself look good from the reports. And it also shows that every client is a special snowflake, and every report is custom for them. Another thing to think about when you're writing out these reports, you try really hard to stay away from jargon. So instead of saying, we would like to implement some A/B testing using Optimizely to ensure that we're increasing our form leads, you can say, we're going to try a couple different landing pages and see what converts better. Really avoid the jargon. The clients don't care. You can just see them glaze over. Like sometimes I'll be in a meeting and I get really excited about something and I start getting technical, and Michaela, our account manager, kind of kicks me under the table. Well, shut up, Dana. Stop talking about that. You're losing them. And so it's important to cut down on the jargon as much as you possibly can. And again, when you're having these conversations, you're relating everything back to that main goal at all times. Something else that's really valuable in a report is to include one page that has everything on it that you can rip out of the report and hand it to the CEO. For example, because usually you're not necessarily reporting directly to the CEO. Let's say you're reporting to the VP marketing manager. This can also go to a board of directors, for example, which is valuable in not-for-profits because they often will look at this stuff and then decide how they're going to take the budget. Having that one page that explains everything can be enormously valuable to help save your client's butt when budget time comes around and they say, is there any value from hiring this company? I think we should fire them. And they can say, well, look at this one page. And because, CEOs are busy people. Sometimes they just want to look at one page. They don't actually care about your 20-page report. They just want to know right now, how are things performing? And every report must be custom. I understand the lure of having a standard template that you set up and then you just do an export every month and it's export and then it automatically goes to the client, for example. Every report must be custom. Yes, it's more time consuming. Yes, it takes more time, but raise your rates. It's always good to raise your rates now and again. And make sure that the client is seeing the value in the report. And if they see the value, they're going to be okay with the extra time and the extra effort it takes to make these custom reports. And stop reporting when you're done. I understand the temptation when the client's paying you, say, like $50,000 a month, and you think, oh, I can't give them 5 pages if they're giving us that much money. They're going to fire us. They're not going to think I'm doing anything. But the report should speak for itself. Stop reporting when you're done. Do not bulk up a report just to make yourself look awesome. And reporting also shouldn't be a chore. I have another story to tell about this. So Chris, my coworker, where are you, Chris? Please wave. There he is. So Chris started with us 6 months ago, and up until that point, I really hated reporting. It was pretty much the worst part of my job, and I'm a serial procrastinator, like expert level. I'm a level 90 procrastinator. I have honed it over many years. And I would put it off and put it off and put it off until Michaela, our account manager, would be like, Dana, you're going to sit down right now and do that report. I'm going to sit here until it's done. And I hated doing it because it was boring. And then Chris started, and we thought, oh, new person. You get to do reports. And Chris got really excited about doing reporting. Like, he's engaged by it. He's excited about it. The changes that he's made to make them look better has been really fantastic. Just having someone else be fired up about reporting has really made it better for us as a company and also for myself. I don't dread report week now anymore. It's like, okay, this week is report week and we're going to blow through it and it's going to be awesome. And if you are like me, a procrastinator, be bored with reporting, get someone else to help you who is fired up about it, because you have to treat reporting like it's the most awesome part of your job. Being bored with reports is going to show in the report. the client is going to think that you are a chore to them, and they will be less excited about continuing to pay your bills. You have to show that enthusiasm. In fact, reporting should probably be the most exciting part of your job, because this is the part where you get to shine and say, look at this awesome stuff we did. Remember that post that we made because Richard Baxter showed us how to make it awesome? That resulted in all these sales, or whatever the client's metric happens to be. So next slide is an old report. This is okay, so this is, I'm going to feel the shame. This is a real report I made almost 6 years ago. It's so bad. It doesn't even say the word leads on it, and that's the client's primary metric of value. Right? Google Local Business Center had just come out. This is like a trip down memory lane. Upgrade the CMS and provide a sitemap listing to Google Webmaster Central. I did that. That's great. Client doesn't actually care about any of this. Thank goodness they're actually still with us. This is the client who's been around for 13 years. I'm so glad that they were so patient with me while I struggled through crappy reporting. This is the report that we do now. This is the main page of the report. This is the one-page rip it out, and actually she does actually rip it out and give it to the CEO every month. Our client contact here is the marketing manager. So we show visitors by channel, because it's something that they think about. And some of the channels they manage and some of the channels we manage. So it's important for them to see the total picture. So for example, internally they handle social and email, and red is bad and green is good, for example. So email, you did really great in May with email. That was super impressive. Thank goodness you're starting a new email campaign. But then for them, their primary metric of value is leads. So if we can show growth in leads month after month compared to last year, it's also a seasonal business. So comparing to the same time last year is very important for them. It's actually an accounting firm, so they typically from April is the big month, and then after that, visits typically go down, but they want to make sure that they're seeing increases compared to last month and last year. That's also an important metric. For them, this report makes sense. And for them, this report means that they know that we've got their best interests at mind and that we're focused on making sure that their goals happen. So from shame to something better, for sure. And now for my last thing, I have something. Everybody, you have your Roger plushies, right? Can you all take them out for me? Okay, I have mine over here. Okay, so repeat after me. I solemnly swear that I will never report on crappy metrics just to make myself look good. Okay, do you all mean it? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, David.
Thanks.
So I think we actually have time for a couple of questions. If anybody wants to go to a microphone, we'll probably be able to get to you.
Awesome.
I love what you said about raising your rates, because if you prove your value, that's when you can raise your rates and charge more, which is kind of the name of the game.
You should raise your rates every year.
So you deliver reports once a month? Is that your standard?
Usually, yeah. Sometimes there's different time periods, but...
Is there ever a time when it's appropriate to go outside that framework, weekly updates, things like that? Can you talk about what?
If there's a really high volume campaign that you're doing, so for example, when we're doing large volume campaigns, or thinking about, for example, campaigns that we've done for government agencies when it's a fixed length, so maybe it's just 6 weeks and it's PPC and here's a very specific goal, then we would definitely look at things weekly. But the reports we deliver on a weekly basis are extremely tactically focused, like here's the adjustments that we need to make, but we need feedback from you, and so it just has to be very specific. And we find that working with car dealerships is actually a good example. I know there's some people here who work with car dealerships. They're extremely sales promotion focused, so often there's a special report that will go out dealing with that specific weekend. Or if there's a new show home opening for our home builder client, like a report about that part on its own. Yeah.
Mackenzie.
Dana, you are my favorite person in the whole world right now. I just
Awesome.
wanted to jump out of my seat and hug you during your whole presentation.
That would have been okay.
This is what we have been painfully struggling through for the last year, really. We've been making some progress, but the one thing I wanted to ask you about was on the SMART goal stuff. So, as you know a little bit about what we do, it's the long game. We're talking 2 to 3 years sometimes in terms of ramp up. So we're very goal-centric in our reporting, and it'll be things like, affecting leads, like lead form submissions, and something about thought leadership moving forward, building the brand.
Yep.
Essentially, those are the general two goals that I can give you an example of. But I hesitate to put a time frame or some kind of a tangible guideline around, like, for example, those lead submission goals, because it's so misleading that if we say, oh, it'll be 6 months and we're going to raise it this much, because if we get to the 6th month and we haven't done that, then they're upset. And we're doing tremendous great work, but they're not going to wait 2 to 3 years for something to come to fruition. So how do we report on those small victories, given those parameters, but without misleading them and without selling ourselves short?
I think you need to make sure that the goal starts with the client. So instead of you setting the goal, the client has to set the goal. So if they don't care about leads for the time being, or if they say we're happy with the status quo with leads while we're building this other part of our business, or while we're working on becoming experts in the media, in which case we want to measure like number of media requests or number of mentions or whatever it might be, then that's okay, but definitely talk to the client about what they consider to be. I don't think we should ever be setting goals for our clients. I think they're going to have to come to us. And if the client is hesitant at all to set things like lead goals, at the very least say, you know what, let's just report on what you're doing now. So, for example, for the adult toy store that I mentioned, she didn't have Google Analytics on her website before she worked with us. So there's no actual traffic goals that we can set because we have no idea. So instead, we're just looking at gross sales for right now. And we don't have necessarily a percentage increase in gross sales that we want to achieve. We just want to see how things are going and how is the work that we're doing affecting that. So it isn't necessarily a goal, it's more of a wait and see, but because it's still laser focused on that particular target, that's what makes the difference in the report, because we know we're all pushing in the same direction.
Well, yeah, I hear you 100% on that. I think it's more the client comes to us and says, within 6 months, we want to see, 10% jump in this or whatever.
Yeah.
And so it's that conversation about, well, is that realistic?
Yep.
And I know if you don't have year-over-year data for your work with them, you may have the year-over-year data in GA, but you don't have we've worked with this client for 1 whole year and we know last year at this time it did this year, You're making inferences, which I get, but I don't know. They're impatient. I understand they're spending a lot of money. So it might be a conversation we continue later, but it's tough.
I think with impatient clients too, that's actually part of our selection process for clients.
Sure.
And I mean, that's one of the joys of being a small agency, is that we can afford to be picky in ways that much larger agencies cannot. And when we do choose clients, like if people come to us and say, well, my goal is to rank #1 for this, we're like, that's not actually a business goal. Like, what's your business goal? Is it to increase number of people signing up for your product?
It's the 5 whys.
Yeah, like it's walking. So often you become, we're joking that it's like it's digital marketing and business consultancy, right? Sometimes you're like a therapist for your client, walking them through. And I'm startled, but also not sometimes, at the number of clients who are really bad at setting goals. Like fantastically bad. Like, how do you still have a business? You don't set any goals. How does that happen?
I think we've all had clients like that.
Yeah, right? And it always startles me, but I shouldn't be that surprised. But that's part of it too, is our job is almost like a therapist to be like, it's okay to set goals. Don't be scared, you can do it. And I think that absolutely, it can take a little while to get there. Some clients are great right out of the gate, and other clients need a little kick to get going. And I think that that's part of our job as good marketers, to ensure that we're helping our clients set these kinds of goals that are achievable.
All right. Thank you, Mackenzie. We're going to take it over here.
Hi, that was fantastic, and
Thank you.
was kind of exactly what I needed to hear today. I'm wondering if you have any advice for clients that have decided to measure their own crappy metrics. We actually have a client that had a horrible website and a semi-black hat SEO campaign. They came to us at that point when their rankings tanked and they were doing horrible.
Yep.
We rebuilt everything. We're kind of starting over from scratch. And they've decided that on top of our reporting, they also force their customer service team to Google different keywords and report in Excel every 3 hours what page they come up. So I'm wondering if you have any advice on how to kind of explain to them how bad that is, and if there's anything we can do.
First off, I'm so sorry. Yeah. Why? Wow. Did they just not have enough phone calls? Like, do you need to keep them busier or something? Like that, the call center people must have a job that is not checking rankings on Google. I think what I would do instead of like trying to talk them out of it, I would try to, this is where, hire a psychologist, there's one coming up, to find out like what is going on in the client's mind that they are so mistrustful. Obviously they've been burned before, they made silly mistakes. Did they know the company was Black Hat when they hired them? No, okay. So, sorry, yeah, you kind of got screwed over there, client. I think honestly, you have to think past that and think, why is the client doing this, instead of just attacking it head on and saying, we're gonna, this is stupid, don't do this. Like, that can make the client seem that you're really threatened by this. But instead, you can talk about the variability of the keyword data and by searching this, but at the same time, like if it's not necessarily hurting you, doesn't matter. And then if you do continue to prove these results over time, the client may actually come to trust you, and therefore they will stop doing this ridiculous stuff. I mean, I'd be happy to talk to you more about this later, but I often find that when clients react strangely or in a bad way to stuff, like you sometimes have to take a step back and think like, what can I do psychology-wise? Like, what is going on in this client's head right now that I can, again, you're a client therapist, like what is going on that's leading to this decision, that's leading to this reaction, and how can I step it back to try to convince them that maybe what they're doing is kind of ridiculous. Okay.
I really want to hear this one last question from Rand right here.
Oh, question from Rand. I'm not terrified. Bring it on.
There. Can we get Rand's mic on? Yell really loud, Rand.
Yeah. How our rates have grown? Yeah. Oh, well, every once in a while we have a conversation, we're like, we should charge more, and then we charge more. It's usually my business partner, Jen, because I am really bad at, I have suffered the disease of I can't believe people pay me for this, so I am really crappy at making people pay money for stuff, so Jen does all that now, because she's more than happy to bill clients for things. I find that actually how we bill, and this is a completely separate conversation, and actually a whole webinar on its own, we don't actually do hourly billings. We do value-based billing. So value-based billing, and please Google this, because I was going to include it, and then the presentation got too long and Erica would have shot me, so I cut it out, although I am over time now. But value-based billing is the idea that what you charge is due to the amount of value that you provide for your client. So if you are doing something and it takes an hour, but you know the client's gonna make $50,000 off of what you do, you should charge more than something that's going to take 10 hours, but it only provides $5,000 of value. And a lot of that is asking clients like, what's your margin on this? And sometimes clients don't even know their margins on things. I don't know how these businesses stay in business. It's amazing. But clients have told me, like, no one has ever asked for our margins before. No one has ever asked for our business goals before. So clearly, not a lot of people are doing this. It can really make you stand out. But ask for their margins, and then the amount you bill should be relative to the amount of value you're going to provide to the client. And so it completely removes that idea of things like hourly rates, of raising your rates, because if you're providing that kind of value, you're not really thinking about it on terms of a 1 hour, this kind of, track your hours and keep track of the amount of time that you spend, but at the same time, you're not necessarily focused on, we need to make sure that everybody is 80% billable. And it also frees you up from a larger company perspective to do things like paid vacation, or giving extra vacation, or not having people work 60-hour work weeks, which I don't do anymore, and it's been amazing because of the way in which we bill clients. The clients make sure they're seeing value, they're happy to pay us because they are making money off of what we do, but we're not necessarily equating that to this is the amount per hour. Does that kind of explain your?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Dana DiTomaso.
Thank you.